Boris Johnson, Burke or Burker?
Hello and welcome to the show. Colourful conversations with Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark. This week we ask the question, are today's politicians awkward and out of touch? Well, it does seem that some of our politicians today are holding on to tradition. And in fact, many of the public think they're just simply out of touch. They can't relate to what they say. In fact, in some cases, such as with Boris Johnson, they feel that commentary is offensive. In fact, some people believe that Theresa May has the charisma of an ironing board. Goodness me. Does that mean that she's out of touch, or just simply someone who perhaps is of a different generation, a different era? What do we need to do? Well, Clergyman Pete, I know that tradition is something that you do value, but at the same time you recognise that perhaps some of our politicians should get with it. What do you believe about our current politicians in the United Kingdom?
Yes, I think that certain traditions are important, and in that sense I'm conservative, not with a capital C necessarily, but in terms of that political tradition and religious tradition of keeping those parts of culture, society, politics, economics that are good, not necessarily ditching everything. So I can see that things that can seem a little stultifying, a little awkward about the way we conduct politics, especially parliamentary politics in Britain, are good to keep, simply because there's no reason to get rid of them. I don't see the point of change for change's sake. But some people do seem very awkward, and our political leaders at the moment seem awkward, partly because, yes, they do seem a little bit old-fashioned in the way that they behave, the way that they speak, the way even that they stand, and the way that they dress.
And the way they dress, yes.
But it's I would say it's worse than that. Now, if I could just take one example, Theresa May, the Prime Minister, it's not simply that she seems a little bit old-fashioned, which she does. She seems to have a certain style, which, for our listeners from outside of the country, they might not quite get this nuance look of it. There's a certain sort of English person that she comes across as, who you would expect to maybe be a librarian or a deputy headmistress, but you wouldn't expect to be Prime Minister. There's a certain feel, a certain ambience to the way that she behaves. It's just around us, an aura around her, should I say, that is one of slightly nerdy person who doesn't really know how to stand, how to dress, or how to communicate, but can get on with the job and maybe shout at kids if they're talking in assembly. That sort of thing. And so you can see that culturally it feels a bit odd. Well, that may not be picked up by other people, but I would say that it goes further than that. She just is. It seems that this inability to dress in a way that's pleasing to the eye, this inability to stand, or in fact even the way that she speaks, to speak in a way that is pleasing, that has a charisma to it. Her inability to do that makes you subconsciously doubt her ability to lead.
Well,
whether it's right or not.
Well, indeed, but actually it goes a little bit further than that, because ironically, although I think it's fair to say that Theresa May is somebody who holds on to the famous traditions that we have in the United Kingdom, but there have been some interesting observations, ironically, and as we know that when we hold a ceremony in the United Kingdom, we do hold on to tradition, yes, we love it, but for some reason, Theresa May, our Prime Minister, still seems to be getting certain things wrong. What do we mean? Well, here's a very simple example. In fact, the Prime Minister's curtsy when actually dealing with dignitaries, and particularly the royal family, seems to be under question. In fact, she looks so clumsy and awkward that actually she's not doing it correctly. She hasn't even actually been following tradition. The tradition is that you do curtsy, of course, when you meet a dignitary, but actually you get it right. You don't stoop and squat down to the floor to the point where it just looks awkward. And in fact, maybe she should sort of think about it in a different way. So I don't know whether you've observed this, but ironically, there's been a lot of commentary in the media recently that every time she tries to meet royalty, perhaps she's not really following tradition. It seems slightly awkward. And here's a little poem. The art of the curtsy is elegance and poise, and to not buckle or bend out of place. Should the dignitary suddenly make a noise, it's because you've invaded their space. If you foolishly fall and then warmly embrace, just fight them furiously across the floor, and as you both writhe all over the place, a bewildered crowd will beg for more. When you rise from the awkward kerfuffle, complain that the dignitary is obscene. Then swiftly perform a quick shoe shuffle and state you'd rather wrestle the Queen. So maybe, Theresa May, that's probably what you should do. Come with it, come to the 21st century and maybe sort of get down with it, be a little bit more casual in your style. Possibly that might help your image. And then maybe you can pick up a few more votes. So, Clergyman Pete, I know that ceremony is good on one level, but do you think that Theresa May will ever be able to relate to the British public?
I think she just has a disconnect. Some people naturally, well, let's put it another way. Some people have maybe just a supreme self-confidence and are able to behave naturally. I mean, over in the US, you could say contrast two politicians, say Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, say, to take someone from the same party, or even Hillary Clinton. You can contrast Hillary Clinton and her husband, Bill Clinton. Now, I don't like either Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton as politicians, but Bill Clinton, very natural, warm, and has a certain charisma about him, reacts naturally in situations in a human manner.
Yes, unlike Theresa May.
Unlike Theresa May, Donald Trump, but even more so, he's able just to relate to people. I'll just let's one example. Imagine this happening to Theresa May. A child is next to her on the. I mean, perhaps it wouldn't happen. This happened to President Trump. He was signing a document, and they put a cute boy next to him for obvious reason. It looks good, and the boy kept wanting to give him a hug.
Yes.
And when Donald Trump noticed he wanted to give him a hug, he gave him a hug. He hugged the boy and then said, "Yes, you're doing very well. Have the pen that I've just signed with." Gave him the pen. So he just did, something nice to the boy. He gave him a hug and then gave him the pen. He often gives the pens away. I mean, it wasn't as if he wasn't expected to, but he gave it to the little boy. Would Theresa May do that? I think that she would have to go through.
She would look a bit awkward. Yes,
she'd look a bit awkward, and then it might be several days later he gets the pen after he's gone through the right committee. I just don't think she has that natural behaviour. Now, but the question is, though, is there anyone in a leadership position in British politics who can do that? Are we just beset with awkward politicians? That's what.
I'm going to mention somebody I know you're a fan of, and this is somebody who I think looks like something from a bygone era, but clearly is very intelligent. Somebody who I think is probably a politician that should be running our country to certainly solve the Brexit issues, etc. But I'm not necessarily think that he's probably the right person. He still has an awkwardness about him, and that's Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yes.
Interestingly, ironically, although he comes across as looking like a rather serious schoolmaster that perhaps might have come from boarding school, and he's there with his pinstripe suit and in fact, ironically, being pictured in the baking heat in recent summer sunshine, still wearing his double-breasted suit, but ironically being obviously quite proud of his family. He has over 6 children.
Yes.
6 children, at least 6 children that we can account for. At least I'm counting them at the moment, and then probably more to come. But the fact of the matter is that he's a leading politician. He's shaping our government. There's no doubt that perhaps he'll play a greater role in the future. But is he right, even though that he's a very intelligent man? Is he someone that the general public can relate to?
Well, you see, I think that he is awkward, but in a very different way. It's to Theresa May. He's more of the awkwardness doesn't come from him, but by people's reaction or people not being able to cope with him. He's very posh, and to British people, sometimes that's a little bit discombobulating. We can't think straight because the person's just too posh. Because there's a certain assumption that posh people from nobility, certain family background, should be leading the country. It's just underneath. It's part of our DNA almost in England, at least, of the British Isles. And he's one of those people. So I think people do feel awkward. He's in that his language is rather highfalutin, and he has the manners of a bygone and the dress sense of a bygone era. But it's a self-assured manner. He is comfortable in himself, and therefore it's not the same sort of awkwardness which appears in Theresa May's case to be a lack of self-assurance and almost nervousness being in the spotlight. So I think he would make a very good, he would make a very good cabinet member. But it would be better if he weren't the actual number one. He would make a very good number two, or maybe as I said, foreign minister or even chancellor.
Well, no, to potential leaders, but being with it is one thing, and perhaps being a little bit too casual is another. So if we take another one of our great heroes, Boris Johnson.
Oh, yes.
I hope somebody would take him. But let's be honest, he hasn't really helped himself in recent times. He's a man who's been highly disruptive, highly vocal, and in fact, even recently made some rather controversial comments about Muslims, and particularly women, wearing burqas.
Yes.
And in fact, he's described them as pillar boxes, and in fact, even as much as bank robbers.
Yes.
I'm not entirely sure that that's really the sort of commentary that we want to hear from politicians. Certainly awkward, and he has been known as bumbling Boris. But do we sort of look at him and say, well, is that the future of our leadership?
Yeah. Now, the awkwardness there, again, it's a different type of awkwardness. So we've got the awkwardness of Theresa May, which seems to be a lack of assurance. She's not quite sure, hasn't quite read the situation correctly. With Jacob Rees-Mogg, it's not a question of not reading it. He just doesn't care about it. He just is him. And I think that's to a certain extent that's true of Boris Johnson. He's another posh type, but the bumbling buffoon posh type. So he says things that just occur to him, but that comes from a sort of arrogance or confidence, a self-assurance. He is not uncomfortable with who he is. Let's say that he has got a certain. So he has a certain confidence in the way that he approaches the world, right? Which you don't get with Theresa May. You get that she's always uncertain about what to say, where to put her legs when she curtsies or something. Boris Johnson, you could see he's not awkward in the same way. What the awkwardness again comes from people's response to him. He says stupid things. He says offensive things. And even when he does apologise, I think he went and apologised to the entire city of Manchester once. He offended a particular northern city. I think it was Manchester. He went and apologised as a publicity stunt. It was great publicity for him. And in the same way, his recent comments about burqas, which we alluded to in the opening moments of the show, is he a Burke for saying that about burqas? An irresistible pun. But he in doing that, it seems to be placing himself in a position to go for the leadership, because in refusing to apologise, being slightly offensive to Muslims, it may be that will play well with a certain
is this a
group within the
long-term strategy of Boris? This isn't just short-term stupidity.
Well,
this
well,
is actually a game plan.
I doubt that he intended it to be taken that. It was written in an article, of course. It wasn't off the cuff remarks. His point about the burger, and what he said was actually fine. It's just that it's the refusal to apologise which makes me think, oh, that's strategic. I think the refusal to apologise may well be strategic for his career purposes. But what he said, was making a good point, which was basically, you can't see the faces, so it could be dangerous. I think it was a fair point that he was making. But it was taken and blown up out of all proportion. Rowan Atkinson, who plays Mr. Bean, weighed in on this debate.
Yes.
So was he being awkward or was it funny as part of a serious political point? Rowan Atkinson thought it was funny. He said, in my opinion, after years of experience of making jokes, that the Burqa letterbox joke is very funny. He said that was his. He thought it was funny, and it was a funny joke. People were deliberately not getting the joke, which I think is true. But Boris Johnson hasn't just made that mistake. That's why people assumed it was offensive, because he's done it many, many times. Not a clumsy awkwardness, but making fun of foreigners in much the way as, say, Prince Philip does. And so he is awkward, but in a different way. So who have you got to choose from? If you were to choose one of those three to be of course, Theresa May is remaining in the position as Prime Minister, but if you could choose between them, who would you have?
Well, I want to balance out the conversation just before we come to a conclusion, and that is, of course, we haven't mentioned another one of your heroes, the bearded Jeremy Corbyn. So, for example, some people think that really he has no way of relating to the public. And yet, ironically, in the last election, many young people could relate to him, even though that, clearly there was a massive age difference. A lot of people who were in their teens and early 20s actually voted for him because they felt that they could relate to his policies and what he was doing.
Well, they related to his policies, yes. He again, now I don't see him as being awkward in that way, in that the awkwardness comes from his self-assurance. He is very much, he doesn't adjust his personality to fit. He is who he is. So he talks in Parliament the same as you would expect, someone serving you in Clark's shoe shop to talk. It's exactly the same. There's no difference.
He reminds me of a chemistry teaper with the padded elbows. And,
But you see, so he's equally awkward.
Yes, he's awkward.
But in the same way as there's the two men we were talking about. Theresa May is awkward in that she seems out of her depth, which is different. Now, Jeremy Corbyn, I think, did appeal to young people because of his extreme socialist views, which are very popular amongst young people at the moment, but they'll go out of it.
Well, I want to come back to this point about the awkwardness. Is it that actually our politicians are not really being helped? Because Jeremy Corbyn is somebody who is very much against these silly rituals in Parliament, whether it be having to curtsy, whether it be having to do certain rituals in Parliament, as in literally some of the practices and speeches and certain etiquette that you have to follow, which really harks back to centuries of traditions. And really, is it that actually that one of the reasons why our politicians seem a bit awkward is that actually the nation hasn't moved on? And maybe that's probably the reason. What's your thoughts there?
Yes, I think that there's a possibility of awkwardness because there's so much that you need to know about how to behave. I mean, when you think about it, does it really matter that Theresa May can't curtsy? Does it really matter if you use the wrong cutlery at a banquet, at a dinner with the Queen? Does it? No, it doesn't matter, but it does. If you see what I mean, it doesn't matter, but in practice it does. It's like saying, well, it doesn't matter that if you don't comb your hair and you refuse to wear a tie. Of course, it doesn't matter, but it does. So, in practice, with a politician, you need someone to have a certain, you need someone who the people trust. Now, it's interesting to know that you could well get someone who had such self-confidence and assurance that they turned up in jeans and a T-shirt and everyone accepted them. Well, not everyone, but enough people and that was part of their personality. That could happen. You could see that happening. But in general, that doesn't happen because the people have a certain view, and if you of what people should look like, and if they don't look like that, then you're out. Yeah. I mean, in terms of leaders of parties at the moment, so we mentioned Jeremy Corbyn as well as Theresa May. Well, there's also, of course, the UKIP head Gerard Batten, who has, to borrow a Nigel Farage phrase, has the demeanour of a low-grade bank clerk. And he was talking to someone else, of course, at the time. Of course. But however, I mean, I think in terms of his understanding of the issues, he's perhaps one of the... I would say his understanding of the issues, from what I've heard, he is the best of the leaders. Yeah. I know it's a small party and he's not going to be Prime Minister, but if we're looking at them, perhaps we should look at Nigel Farage himself, the ex-leader of UKIP. He's the most natural and least awkward of them, with the most charisma. And
not only that,
a great understanding, particularly of the economics.
Yes, and he challenges tradition, and he's not frightened to do so, which I think is, and he can still do it with some decorum, which is a difficult balance.
Yes, certainly his oratory skills have developed over the years in the being a member of Parliament of the European Parliament, such that he would come across extremely well. But I mean, at the moment, his views do not chime with that of the political elite in the country. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. That's something in his favour, but it means that he's unlikely to become Prime Minister.
Yes, unfortunately, that may be true. So, listeners, what do you think? I mean, do you think our politicians are a little bit awkward now? Can you relate to them? In fact, do you think they're so out of touch? Actually, really, none of them are ever going to be able to do a decent job for us. And maybe there's no hope. Well, of course, we know that there is some hope. And, of course, we should be all turning to Mark and Pete. Yes, maybe it's the Mark and Pete mantra that should be running the country. I mean, I don't know what you think, Clergyman Pete, but what do you think as a final point?
Yes. I'll vote for you. No, I think in terms of awkwardness, I think that obviously that you're brilliant at that, being extremely awkward. No, I think that yes, the Mark and Pete mantra, by which of course we mean long-termism and localism, is what should be the watchwords of all politicians. But in terms of being able to get in that position, I mean, we don't have we, as in you and I, Mark, are not in a position to take over as Prime Minister yet. But if all the listeners get together, we do a GoFundMe, maybe we'll be in that position in the next few weeks.
Well, we would definitely be in touch. And what you need to do, listeners, is keep in touch. Why not log on to markandpete.com and listen to some of our podcasts? Yes, we cover this and many other subjects. In fact, why not give us a comment? Fill out the contact form and we will read it out on the next show. So join us next time for more colourful conversations with Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark.